Okay, so what we're going to do is learn about the blood-brain barrier. So what they did here was, I think I read about it online, is they used some kind of chemical to dissolve the tissue. And then this right here is all the networks and capillaries. So I think last slide, because I'm having to re-record this because uh, the sound didn't go right. But so there's something that protects the brain, and it's this blood-brain barrier, a network of capillaries and tightly packed endothelial cells that protect the brain. So the here's the tightly packed endothelial cells is inside these cells right here. There's this wall. And what the blood-brain barrier does is it protects the brain. You don't want to allow these immune system cells here to get up here, because what an immune system cell does is it looks for a damaged cell and then it goes and kills it. We don't want anything to get up into the brain that could harm the neurons, because once you lose a neuron, that's it. It's end of story. And the reason why you can't replace another neuron is because of the dendrites and axons. If you replaced a new neuron, then how would it know where the different dendritic pathways are in the brain? Okay, let's see. So since we have this blood-brain barrier, it's really hard to get things up in the brain. And in fact, like herpes, it can get past this blood-brain barrier, and that's one of the reasons why you'll have it for life. Because anything that can pass the blood-brain barrier is going to stay with you, because you can't get rid of those cells, because if you kill them, then, that's, you just don't want to do that, because your brain is the be-all and end-all of life. So the blood-brain barrier is all this network of capillaries. It's got these tightly packed endothelial cells, so it won't allow anything to come through. But this is the reason why neurons have to use glucose for their source of nutrition. So maybe a way that you could remember this is, when I was studying, I would always kind of want something sweet. Now, it doesn't really work this way. They've told me that it doesn't really work this way, that if you eat a bunch of sugar, that it's going to help you to remember things. But I'm just not quite sure why they're saying that. Maybe it's the way you break down the sugar when you eat, because there have been many studies to show that if I give one group a list of words to study and another group a list of words to study, and then I give one group a shot of water and I give the other group a shot of glucose, that the people who are given the shot of glucose will remember more words. We also know that one of the reasons why emotional memories tend to be stronger is because when you get very emotional, the glucose goes up in your brain, up in your blood, which seems to serve to solidify the memories. But I think on the other hand, sugar has been associated with free radicals, and I think a lot of you know that free radicals, kind of wreak havoc on the body. And so if you eat a lot of sugar, then there seems to be more free radicals that run around, and that can actually damage the brain. But just maybe a way that you could remember that the primary source of nutrition for neurons is glucose is to think about, when I study, do I crave sugar? I don't know if that's going to work for you or not. Okay, but glucose is very simple, and so that's what the primary source of nutrition is, because it can pass through this blood-brain barrier. But not only it can't just pass through, it needs something called an active transport. So there's a protein-mediated process by which useful chemicals are brought into the brain. So those glial cells, they actually help the neurons. They nourish the neurons by being involved in this active transport system. Okay, so glucose, hormones, amino acids, and vitamins are brought into the brain via active transport, and the glial cells are involved in that. Glucose is a simple sugar that's the primary source of nutrition for neurons. Thiamine is a chemical that's necessary for the use of glucose. So in order for the neurons to be able to use the glucose, they have to have thiamine. And thiamine is a B vitamin, so you can find that in breads and cereals. Now, your book goes into something called Korsakoff syndrome, which is found in alcoholics. You can read about that in chapter 2. But alcoholics tend not to have the best nutrition, and so a lot of times they don't get enough thiamine. And so when they say, oh, they have a wet brain, they're usually saying, oh my gosh, their brain function has been seriously depleted, and things like that. They can't remember. They don't, you even see like they have a different walk in the cerebellum because they have that shuffle where they can't lift their feet up, and they walk kind of with a shuffle, and that's because they've killed so many cells in the cerebellum that now it's harder for them to balance and it's hard for them to lift up their feet and actually move. So, they walk with this kind of shuffle and a wide stance. So Korsakoff syndrome is like, it results from not having enough thiamine, and it's associated a lot of times with alcohol. So a lot of you know that when you drink the caffeine sodas, which I'm terrible at, is it depletes the calcium in your body. And so alcohol seems to be something that actually depletes the thiamine in your body. Okay, so that ends the blood-brain barrier. Let's just review the main points that I went over. The blood-brain barrier is this network of capillaries. It looks really cool here. What it does is it serves to protect the brain. It makes sure it keeps everything out, and how it does it is has all these tiny little capillaries with these walls to keep everything out. But since you have the blood-brain barrier, the primary source of nutrition for neurons has to be glucose because that's what can get up there. And then the glial cells, they help transport it in. In order for the brain to use the glucose, it needs an adequate amount of thiamine. So those are the main points that I was trying to get across in this module.